All right, we're live. Welcome to the inaugural stream of the Basket Weavers. I am your host, Liquid Swan, and this is my co-host, Lord Dunsmuir. How are you doing, Lord Dunsmuir?
I'm doing just fine this Sunday evening. How are you, sir?
Pretty good. Just paying attention to what's going on lately. It's been kind of nuts. Not sure.
Yeah.
Not sure where we're gonna go with it, but let's see.
Yeah. Do you want to? Should we indicate that we actually have met in real life? We are people who know each other in real life.
Yeah.
Co-broadcasting now.
Yeah, we know each other in real life. We've met numerous times and had long chats about state of the world and the state of things. And
yeah,
it's been interesting.
So three cheers to the social networking efforts of all these broadcasters bringing people together in the real world.
Yeah, all the skeptic community and who started this? Was it?
I don't even know because I found out about it in my formative years. So it got going when I was still a youngin', still a 13-year-old, surfing the net during recess in the library.
Oh, it's Mark. Mark was the guy that started, I believe. Not so obvious. Yeah, the YouTuber. But he did it probably inspired by AA and such. So.
He's the guy who started the first in-person meetups back in the day.
No, this is a very recent thing. Just I think it started after Skildings, which was that meetup or the event that everyone talked about.
This in particular, yeah. I thought you were talking about the sort of general coming together of all these different groups, meeting up in real life. I was thinking about Skepticon and stuff that they would do back in the day.
Yeah. Oh, so I don't know what we could talk about for our inaugural stream. I have this kind of thing I wrote up a while back. I could read it, and then I could read it like a little bit at a time, and we could chat about it. I don't know how I feel about it now. I just saw it, and.
Oh sure, yeah. What's the topic in general?
It's like the state of man, I suppose.
All right, man in general.
Yeah, sort of like the state of man in the decline.
All right.
Okay, so I'll start reading, and I'll just read like a short paragraph at a time and see how it goes, and if it gets bullshit, I don't know. I wrote this quite a while ago, so it might be full of shit. So let's give her a go. All right, so,
I'm ready to be.
I didn't title it, but the great hope for man has become sterile, and we all mope around awaiting the decline. Where will we be seated upon its dismal bottom? Some place low, one must suspect. But can this be avoided? So I suppose that's the opening question.
All right.
There is no guaranteed.
So the thesis.
Sorry, go ahead.
There's a thesis in the question.
Yeah.
So the thesis summarized. What would you say boiled down to as few words as possible in the outline of this? What's the thesis?
I think that the great hope for man. I think that's sort of like the Western civilization.
Yep.
And it's become sterile, and this is sort of like that Oswaldian or Oswald Spengler sort of idea that decadence breeds sterility.
Okay.
And we're sort of just in this decadent state awaiting decline. I read I don't want to go into too close to where we are locally, but let's say west coast of Canada. Where I live, or we relive, the birth rate is 0.95 per woman. It's the lowest in Canada.
I'm actually surprised it's that high, since most women I meet my age express the desire they never want children.
Yes.
And the propaganda, the posters on the bus stops, in some cases encourage that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Abortions at the ready.
Yeah, real nightmare stuff. Encouraged in schools even.
I gotta turn that music down. Hold on.
Yeah, and the whole use of sex ed to make girls fear pregnancy, I think is part of it too.
Yeah, which is sad because that's you can't, men can't have children without women that are obviously willing to, unless it's some
Right.
sort of nightmare dystopia. So really, the responsibility for civilization continuing is partially on these women not having kids. It's kind of sad. We could be having empty cities at some point, you know?
Yeah, we all gotta do our part on a basic level, you know, and that's like you can't dispute that on a level as basic as just having children and reproducing.
Yeah, you can't just give up. You know, the struggle
Yeah.
all through time has been like this. We live in the we live in the most decadent time, but we live in the richest period of human history. We've never been more wealthy, but yet this is where we're at. It's pretty insane.
Mm.
Hold on here, just gonna double check to make sure. Oh, don't want to get backfeed. All right, so I'll move on to the next thing.
I could hear the music that time. I couldn't hear it before, but I heard it that time.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Anyways, it doesn't matter.
It's Vivaldi's Spring, I believe.
Oh, it sounded nice.
So there is no guaranteed movement outside of entropy over time long enough. Any movement risks love and destiny. Those souls brave enough to tough out the coming struggles, to courageously confront and cross the clear Rubicon set before them. They may come across pure weakness, and all their movements will be unopposed, and all love and destiny will be maintained, and all will revere them as lightbringers in the time of obfuscating and confusing darkness. One hopes this would be the case, but I cannot foresee this future. So, basically, I'm trying to get at everything will break down eventually because the energy can't keep going in one direction. Eventually, it's sort of a civilization body dies and something is renewed from the corpse. And I don't know if... Yeah. But I think we're headed towards that.
Yeah, and I would say that's something that is predictable because it's happened many times in the past, and you can see signs as clearly Spengler has done. He's citing historical examples in his work, and a lot of other writers. And there does seem to be a pattern of decadence breeds laziness and other such qualities that lead to a collapse, and then something comes anew. Either there's a divine intervention or some crazy change comes, and something rises again. That niche is filled, and there's a resurgence of some kind.
Yeah, and a new civilization sort of takes over. But the thing is, too, is usually as a civilization declines, it at least for us, the torch has been passed to us from something that came previous, and obviously it passed from previous to that civilization. So who are we passing the torch to? And if we don't, are we sort of doomed? Is civilization doomed to fall forever?
Well, I would say that when the renewal comes of a civilization that's fallen and then is coming back, sometimes it's not the descendants of the original civilization. Sometimes it's an entirely new nation that's simply come into the area and begun behaving as the previous culture. So perhaps when China conquers us, they will revive Western culture.
Oh, sort of like how the Akkadians took over Samaria and used the old Sumerian language in their official documents, but really it was a dead language.
Yeah, or in the way that the Mongols, when they conquered China, became Chinese, or the Germans, to a certain extent, when they conquered Rome, became Romanized. I don't know, maybe with China, because they're already so advanced, they wouldn't Westernize, they would just make us Chinese.
I think the rise of China could be questionable because to be honest, I think they've set themselves up for a massive population bomb because of that one-child policy they had for so long. There won't be enough, unless they automate. There's going to be a huge problem there.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the other thing that's always sort of been a big question mark for me about China is all those empty cities. First of all, are those even real, or is that just something that like our Western media has made up?
I think it's real. I've seen some like independent media guys go out there and check it out, and I think it's real, but you never know.
Yeah, and secondly, okay, if it is real, what's up with that? And why are they like copies of Paris and copies of like other world cities? Like, what's the deal?
Well, as Hegel said, all great things happen twice. The first time is honest, and the second time is a farce. Not that I'm a
Yeah.
Hegelian, but I think that's probably some wisdom in that.
Mm-hmm.
So
No, that's
you can kind of see like even in Egypt, right? The newer pyramids are like crappier, and they've fallen apart, but the older ones have lasted.
mm-hmm.
So maybe
Yeah.
it was just sort of a lost art, or they're trying to create culture by imitating past greatness. But even Vegas, right? Like Vegas has a lot of sort of stuff like that, and one of the fakest cities in the world,
Yeah.
and obviously
But
most degenerate probably.
but with a unique skyline.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. All I can see under ideal circumstances is a struggle condition against wounded animals, weak but carrying immense mass. Within their death throes, millions might perish. Incompetence can be deadly even without competence. Oh crap! I can't remember. I can't see what I wrote there. Without competence, indolence. Oh, yeah, whatever. For death happens not due to it, but despite it. So basically, like, doesn't matter how competent like our elites try to be or act, the death and destruction's sort of already gonna happen. Like it's already kind of lined up to happen.
Yeah. Sort of the idea that you're going to lose competency over a long enough time span in the elite because they don't still have the momentum of being on the upswing and conquering the world. They've conquered the world for decades and they've lost their edge. Sort of the idea.
Yeah, and that
they've been spending their time taking advantage of the power that their ancestors won.
Which is sort of like an indication of like this issue that people think is a material thing, which is, you need food and shelter and all that, right? It's actually a spiritual thing where, despite the fact that we have immense material wealth, people like imbibe in drugs and alcohol and whoring and all that stuff, and yet because they have no spirit, they have no sort of raison d'etre, and they just sort of they become so small. It's crazy how the pure material just makes you so tiny, and I think it vanishes you in a sense.
The whole like rational way of viewing everything in the world. You're limited to one person. You're a number, and you're just one. When everything's calculated in millions of this and how many units per this and
yeah,
I don't know.
No man can look at a river and now not think, oh, imagine how much power could be generated by the force of this water, right? No man looks at the trees and doesn't think, how much oxygen does this generate? How much carbon is being sequestered? Can we use this to heat my home? And so on and so on, or build my home.
Yeah.
That'd be another. So
yeah,
man sort of sorry.
Well, I was just going to comment, appreciating things for the quantities they produce as opposed to the qualities they possess.
Or just being itself, too, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a tree is more than just like the physical material. It's like part of our environment,
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it does have the material value, but there's very little spiritual value seen by people. Rather than being like a creation, it's just sort of another thing to be exploited.
Right, as opposed to seeing it as a tree is fulfilling its purpose by being what it is.
Yes, like a priori, yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I'll move on. So as to that death and destruction, that should be a sobering thought for all who tread on this earth and land. But it is still yet nothing compared to what will come without new Caesars and heroes to will to be the truth of love and destiny. It seats itself like an apple on a damned tree, festering petulance surrounds it. Its beauty screams forward at you like a child clinging to the edge of a cliff, moments away from ruin. And so sits the great hope for man, that its sterility may be quenched by the will to destiny and an appetite for glory. So, what I'm getting at there is there's sort of this rot, a rot that comes from not moving, not acting, and that rot is creates sterility, the comfort, of not having to do, not having to act, to be acted upon in a sense.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at. And the reference to was it Kings and Heroes? You said
Caesars and heroes.
Caesars and Heroes.
Like the people that sort of stand up and say, something's wrong, we need to change it. Something's wrong, we need to fix it. Now, according to Spengler, Caesars come at the winter of civilization. So, it could be a long winter, but it could be a short one. So
yeah.
If we're at that point, it might not be a good sign.
Yeah, what do you think about the Caesaristic possibilities of Prince Charles?
I see absolutely none.
He seems to be expressing his desire to flex more royal power than his mother.
I'd say royal influence, but it's sort of like he's sort of I find him very weak. His mother is also very weak, but at least she kind of stood by some weird thing where she just didn't interfere. But it's almost...
Yeah, his mother seems like defeated, and Charles seems like if you can't beat him, join him. And now he's on the winning team.
Yeah, well, he's on the winning team for now, I think, but we'll see, because I think his team's sort of driving into a wall. They don't see it coming either. It's like someone on their own team has slapped up the Wile E. Coyote tunnel, and they're chasing the Roadrunner, but they're just gonna ram right into it.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know. Could see Prince Charles have a Ceausescu moment.
Yeah. Well, who knows what the future will hold. I think it's possible, like, William could be based. I think that's very low possibility. I don't think Charles will be, because I think he's too normy. He doesn't have the spirit with him, Like,
yeah, I know he's like clashed. He clashed with members of the royal family like in his 20s, but that was like freaking 60 years ago. So I don't even know the significance of that at this point.
When you're the king too, like, you're supposed to be like the spiritual representation of the nation. And when I look at Charles, I don't see
head of the church.
Yeah, the church, but also like the he's supposed to be like the embodiment of man in the nation. And I think I don't see it when I see him. I just see someone that, like a mama's boy that always had his clothes put out for him and complained about his tea being not sweet enough. Who knows? We'll see. We'll see. Maybe he'll be different, but I'm pessimistic. So
yeah, and it has been known to change people's personalities in the past. An heir to the throne, once becoming king, suddenly actually having the power affects you and makes you act differently.
It could happen, yeah. If that happens, I'll be shocked, but happy. As long as he doesn't take it to the paws. But I mean, I'm assuming he's gonna do that.
Yeah, I mean, that seems very likely.
Yeah. So I go further. The rot sits both above and below the potential heroes, and both are dangerous, though that from the top is of chief concern, for it is out of place. Their place is underserved, and it is begging to be refined into its rightful place, out of power, for they are already out of control. So basically, I'm saying here is like, you have these powers, these elites that are in power, and they don't really deserve it. They're not really elites. They're overproduced elites, let's say,
Hmm.
and they're out of control, and that's why things are sort of getting worse because the competent people aren't going up. The competent people are getting out, let's say.
Yeah.
Maybe quite wisely. Rescue, in this case, comes from the upper middle through necessity. The uppers au courant are usurpers, madmen, criminally insane. Their gasp dooms all, least themselves, and it must be made right. Yes, yours are of trouble, but we none get to choose ours, but only what we do with what ours are. The historical epic is that of acting man. Heroes, visionaries, the vast mass of plebeians cannot act. They are simply acted upon. Are you a plebeian? Or are you who has written histories? So here I'm just going in on about at some point the rabid dogs sort of have to be disposed of.
Hmm.
And that you can't rely on the masses to do it because they're sort of shambling and afraid.
Yeah, I agree. As you were reading that, it was calling to mind the Dark Knight. The people need a Batman, even though they don't deserve a Batman.
Yeah, no, I guess that's true. Yeah. So the question, are you a plebeian? That's just to ask if you are awake and aware of what's going on.
A plebeian. Well, so in this sense, you're using a plebeian to mean someone who's aware of their status, who isn't just stumbling through things.
Yeah, like you're aware that something's wrong and that there's a cause, rather than it being sort of just that it just happens. That there are like captains of the ship that are sort of steering it towards the cliffs or icebergs. But even after that, you kind of have to. What separates a plebeian from let's say a visionary is someone who has immersed themselves in the real politic. They've done the reading. They've looked at the masters, and they're using that to sort of put themselves in the historical epoch and decide what's coming next, or based on what's happened, and what could they do to fix the issue. Like, perhaps it's hopeless, but at least they're kind of aware that there could be a path, rather than just being a victim of whatever's coming.
Right, the person who is simply aware versus the person who takes action.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And the action could be little, but it's sort of like you're on a highway and there's this big truck coming and it can't stop, and you can maybe get over to the side rather than getting rammed through. And maybe you get off to the side and don't get rammed through, but everyone else gets rammed through because they didn't notice the truck that was barreling down on them. I mean, it's just tragedy all over the place, really.
Yeah, and you don't even have a lever to pull.
Yeah. So I go further. Plebeians will go where you command them, all while truly believing it was their own true will. No doubt some will weakly object, but the vast mass will follow its survival instincts and go along with you. But only if you remove the alternatives, only if you cast out the competitors amongst you, the rotten on highs. The serious concern in this regard is that the limits of actions the rot can take are none, for they value power and little else. They have no real morals or beliefs beyond this, and this in some respects has cemented their grip on it. You must become this monster. So this is a callback to Nietzsche.
Yeah, you gotta seize the crown, become the monster so you can defeat the monster.
Yeah, if you fight monsters, you become one, basically. And if you don't become one, you're just going to be stomped out. Not that you want to become one, but it's just what else can he do but fail? It's kind of stark.
Yeah, it's one perspective.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Say, I mean, if you're a monster to defeat an opposition, you don't have to continue that monster nature afterwards. That's sort of the gamble.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of part of the idea. You can act um, violently if it's within the guides of the law and righteousness, right? Like a hanging is a violent occurrence, but if the proper rituals are performed, being a jury with a judge, a trial, evidence is presented, all the things that are part of our law system, then if that ritual is performed correctly, then violent events like a hanging can happen with no guilt of any of the participants because it's done justly. So I think that could be an example of something like that, where you sort of become a monster because you've taken necessary steps that are beyond what would be normally acceptable.
I suppose you've allowed the monster to live through you without having to actually embody it.
Yeah.
And then I say, not to aim to become a monster exactly, but to surpass it, to reverse the stagnation, the uncreative masturbation, the suicidal ideation and worship of the false idols. They will gleefully apply rules to you, while not following any rules at all. You must be prepared to do the same, or you will perish. That is inevitable. It is a big ask, but the condition for survival at this junction. Can one make this call? Can one reduce oneself to defeat an existential evil? Christ had to go into hell in order to confront Satan, and while he was there, he didn't follow the devil's rulebook and instead created his own. So, here I sort of make a contrast, I suppose, from that idea. That it's not necessarily to become fully the monster, but to sort of embody power so that you can right things. As you said,
yeah.
Righteously. Yeah. And
the example I think that's... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and the example I use here is Christ and Satan.
Yeah, and I think that's a message that speaks to everyone. I think everyone, whether they're on the good team or the bad team, in their head believes that violence is acceptable under certain situations to bring righteousness, but generally bad. That's sort of a basic assumption, I think, at least among Westerners and people I have interacted with in my life.
Yeah. Seems fair, right?
Yeah.
So I go on, you heroic sons stand amongst the ruined walls built by your ancestors, and the whole of the wilds are pouring in. Do you stand idly by to await demise, or do you fight valiantly against this false demiurge? Once the battle begins, there can be no retreat, for they will follow you to the ends of the earth to defeat you, without compromise, without mercy, and without relent. In such a case, there will be no end to it, except your end, and even then, they will not even halt. They will destroy you and your family. They will target your loved ones specifically and attempt to turn them against your memory, just if to make a cruel example as a warning towards others, to erase you or point you as evil incarnate. That is their program. So here I sort of just go into the facts of the matter in terms of the struggle against, let's say, degenerate behavior. And the walls are just symbolic of the culture and the society that we have in its strength. And when those walls are removed, the chaos, the wild forces, the entropy seeps in and destroys everything that was civilized.
Yeah, the habits, the sort of collection of habits and material things that make up a culture. As the habits fade, the culture sort of spins out and people revert back to their more base nature. Yeah.
And you could imagine too, like if you're in a city and a bunch of wild tigers just suddenly start wandering the streets, that will become very uncivilized extremely quickly.
Right, because if you were from a culture that was used to tigers, you would have developed certain expected ways of interacting with them. But here, people we're not used to tigers, so we deal with tigers on an animal level because that's all we have to work with.
Yeah, it would basically just run MF run, and then
Yeah.
and you could imagine the mayhem, right?
Hmm.
Uh, so that's sort of the program of the anti-civilizationists or the Rousseauians, the utopians. It's this idea of a return to the Edenic, bestial, and conscious. And I've used this example with people, and what I asked them, I try to see how far they're willing to go to make utopia happen. And there's sort of a trick to it because it starts off, I say, okay, well, if you could make the world perfect and there'd never be any more suffering, right?
Hmm.
How many babies would you be willing to strangle personally? And most people will say, well, they'll at least start out. Most of them, a lot of people will just not. They don't want to play that game, right? But if you can find one,
Hmm.
it's kind of an interesting experiment. And they'll start off. I'll say, okay, what about just one baby that has terminally ill, and they might go, okay, yeah, I'll do that if it stops all suffering going on from into the future, right?
Mm.
And then I'm okay. What about two? You've already done one, right? And then they go, okay, two's okay. And then I've gotten people, especially leftists, up to like tens of millions of babies being butchered cruelly just to get to utopia. And the trick of it is, one, utopia is impossible, right? So, but some people might think it's possible, and that's the problem. So there are people out there that will think it's possible, and they're willing to do anything, and I mean anything, to achieve it. And if you can somehow convince them that it will achieve it, there's nothing that they'll stop it doing. And this is why you end up with millions of people dying in like the Soviet Union or whatnot. And
Yeah.
and that could all be fixed by, like, say, the truth, thou shalt not kill. You draw a line there. You don't go any further. And by kill, I mean murder, obviously, not just like war or self-defense or whatever. Since that's in the news. As I go on, so one must realize that one does not risk merely themselves, but they risk everything that they love as well. This simply means that failure and surrender must be avoided, to the point at which you should engage in their tactics unreservedly. Not because you like them, but because you want to win. You want them to retreat, to beg for leniency and fairness. It will be up to you at that point, at the point of enthronement, whether or not you grant such. But you advisedly shouldn't. You should use their tactics of demonization, demonetization, propaganda, and cruelty. We all wish it were not so, but remember, they would have you dead, your loved ones tortured and disemboweled, or turned against you for their own survival. They would leave you no legacy, and so why should you leave one for them? Now here I kind of get into, it's like a more cruel, I guess, realpolitik, how to deal with your defeated foes.
Yeah, I was expecting to hear something about in the Bible. There's a hymn about Babylon where they sing. They really hate Babylon in the Bible. I guess they lost a war and the Babylonians were pretty harsh. So in the hymn they sing, "Oh God, destroy Babylon, smash their children against rocks and exterminate them." I was getting some of those vibes, very like revenge vibes.
Well, it's not even revengeance. It's more like putting an end to it, you know?
Yeah.
Because it sort of sets a standard for how people should act, and if someone acts in an evil manner, they need to be stopped. Like,
Yeah.
you don't let you don't put child molesters in like kindergarten classes. You put them in jail, or maybe other things.
Anywhere outside of society, really.
Yeah, or maybe like a wood chipper or something.
Yeah.
Feet first, or in Minecraft.
Which seems to have always been a pretty popular position through the ages, whatever the current laws happen to be.
Yeah, true. I don't think that's very controversial, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen just sitting in traffic on our local highway here, people with stickers on the back of their windows that says "Kill your local pedophile." I laughed at it. I didn't think it was controversial at all.
Yeah, in Minecraft, right?
Yeah, in Minecraft. Yeah.
So I go on, but at this point you might ask, what is the point? Of course these actions you take will not look different from those of the rotten on highs, but this is not the complete whole. You do these things to stop them, yes, as they would stop you, but you do these things for a higher reason, for they worship death, and every day ritualistically call it forth. You are simply aiding them in their quest, and speeding up that process in a less cruel manner. Every fiber of their being begs for death, and you fight for life. And that is the difference. That you force them only to live by their own principles, while you live by yours. So that's the end of that work.
Yeah.
That's how I spiritually justified doing bad things.
Yeah, and that's a Frank Herbert's Dune quote, if I'm not mistaken. You referenced there at the end.
Oh, I wasn't aware.
Oh, it's the statement is when you have power, I ask you for mercy because that is according to your principles. When I have power, I show you no mercy because that is according to my principles.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So the idea of, if someone whose principle is power will take advantage of your actual principles,
which is
purely to gain power,
which is super messed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But hey, you got to expect that. It's a real world.
Yeah.
So, I also, do you have anything you want to talk about specifically? I have more. I just don't want to hog all the airtime. If you got something.
No, I mean I've been trying to sort of figure out with local news what our future looks like here in Western Canada, because personally it's sort of hard to read the tea leaves looking at local news and the CBC. Like obviously there's propaganda, but trying to sort of sift and find the actual facts. Seems like there's a lot of supply chain breakdown from flooding also. Flooding and certain highways getting cut off, and protest groups increasingly calling for shutting off fossil fuel production and pipelines. So I don't know. What do you think the future looks like for British Columbia? Are we going to have food? Are we going to have gas? What do you think?
I think our resiliency is definitely in question in terms of like material wealth.
Yeah.
And another thing too is as things get worse, it's just gonna get, well, obviously it's just gonna get harder, but it's gonna get harder faster. I think this will be, personally, I think that what's happening right now with all the shortages and the inability to bring stuff in, I think that's gonna be short term, but it's indicative of our inability to be resilient in the face of this, because this is something that just happens. Like, disasters happen, but 21st century civilizations are able to handle it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We shouldn't be having to be restricted to 30 liters of gasoline. And I have an electric car, but that people are, and everything about it is totally not correct either. The way they're going about it, for example, in terms of like saying you can only buy this much, which is rationing. They could say or put a price multiplier on the gas. And I know no one likes to pay a lot more for gas, but what it would do is you'd only buy what you needed, because you wouldn't want to be overpaying right now, because you know that the supply is going to be coming in and you'll get back to the regular price at some point.
Right.
But the thing is, our elites don't understand basic economics at all. Like,
Well, I think the situation is the people at the very top who actually give the orders do understand, and they know the effect it's going to have. And all the bureaucrats down the middle of the chain, they've been intentionally miseducated so that they don't see a problem here.
I don't think like I don't see say John Horgan. I don't think he understands economic like basic economic theory enough. I think he's probably a Keynesian or worse to really make that. I'd like to say it was malice, but uh, I don't look at this guy and see that. I think it's just ignorance of basic economic logic. But
Yeah, I think so. I think so with John Horgan. Yeah.
yeah, I think Mike Farnsworth. I don't see him as a mega brain 4D chess player. I just see him as like a plug that was put there, and he has minions that sort of tell him what to do, and then he acts like he made the decision. I think that's the problem, really, because of course, as you said, the minions aren't. They're not poorly educated. They're falsely educated.
Yeah, miseducated.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
another thing too is like the way they've printed off, the way they've supplied like liquidity in the market, like for cash for everybody lately, the last 2 years.
Mhm.
It's just like destroyed the value of money. When I go to the grocery store, something that used to like let's say a pack of meatballs used to cost $10, and now it's 14. That was just like within 6 months.
Yeah.
Certain things are like milk's basically the same price, but that's a cartel anyways. So it's double price what it was, what it would be if we had like free markets with the states. But
Yeah, and we've got like decent local production of dairy, at least dairy and like poultry.
yeah,
But well, until something happens and even our internal supply chains are disrupted, like even one city can't ship poultry to the next city over. So
yeah,
that's a little frustrating.
yeah, it is. And what they like to do is they like to blame the weather for like the issue, like all the rain. But
Yeah, and
dikes,
then with the way that they do the climate change narrative, blaming the weather is like an implication. By implication, they're blaming you.
yeah, which is totally nonsense in reality. Like, but it's just sort of. I think it's a sort of because people lack like religious. There's sort of a lack of religious belief amongst most people. I think that really spells the fall of our civilization. That people are clinging spiritually to this pseudo religious cult that is like environmentalism because they see something there and they're like, well, the environment means something to me, so I'm going to attach all my religious wants and needs to this because I don't understand the world and this makes me feel better about myself and I feel like I'm morally superior or morally worthwhile for doing so. But in
Yeah,
reality, it's just again a cult.
yeah. Like I can say, personally, just this weekend, I went down to the BC legislature to attend a freedom protest that they do fairly regularly. And what happens is there's multiple protests that get scheduled on the same days in front of the BC legislature because the police like to be there to provide security, and so you'll get assigned a side of the grass to go to. And for months now, there's been these regular protests against vaccine mandates, against lockdowns, for the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and our Bill of Rights, and then across the lawn, there's an equal size group of people who are equally alarmed at the state of the world, but they say it's because we're using gasoline, and they demand that the province stop using gasoline. It's just amazing to me that these two people are both equally freaked out and both blame the government, but one group literally wants the government to change the weather. Um, it's just bizarre.
Well, you can imagine like cult leaders back in the day going to the king during like a drought and saying, "We need more priests to pray for good weather so that we can grow more crops because we're starving or whatever. Or we could have a famine." And then they take that
Yeah.
seriously, and back then they didn't call it science, but now they call it science, and it's really not. It's just the same shit repackaged with a new
Yeah,
label.
it's people that would have been into rain dances.
Yeah, exactly. I could see some maybe some catharsis coming from it, but it's just nonsense. Like, you can't pay the government more money to change the weather, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Pay the government money, and they'll perform the proper rituals, and then the weather will improve.
And another thing I've noticed too is with these sort of lefty guys that protest, they're always protesting for the government to have more power. It's like the government, how dare you not have enough power? Like
Yeah,
what the hell is this? It's just absolute. It's just it's almost like it's a forced meme. What will be the right term? Astroturfed. It's totally astroturfed. It's not.
yeah,
It's not green. What do they call it? Grassroots. It's just fake, plastic, plastic nonsense. It's sort of like almost a symbol of our civilization.
yeah. And I'll say at the BC legislature, they don't. I haven't seen them do this much now. But in years past, like pre-COVID, 2018 or so, I would see in local job listings advertise. You know, they'd pay you 21, $22 an hour. Come and be a protester for whatever cause. So
Man's got to
you know
eat.
who knows what's funding that. And I was like, people. I'd heard people report that from Edmonton as well. They'd said like anti-pipeline protesters are paid. So I don't know. I've been looking at job listings recently, and I haven't seen a trace of that. So maybe they've got enough grassroots people now to just be a genuine cult.
Or maybe they ran out of money, or they're just ineffective, or maybe their money's being directed elsewhere, like over in the what's that forest back out in Port Renfrew.
Oh yeah, Fairy Creek.
They got those hippies like cementing their arms in the ground and stuff.
Yeah, that's crazy because it's this place out in the middle of nowhere, and there's like hundreds of RCMP facing off against hundreds of eco protesters.
Yeah. The whole thing almost
literally-
seems fake. Like, I mean, it's real, but it's like the regime is fighting itself. You know?
Yeah, well, it's like it's a Extinction Rebellion, which is like a UK based like rich people's eco socialist movement.
Yeah.
And they're trying to shut down a logging site that's owned by the RCMP's pension fund, and the RCMP is trying to stop them. So
It's like masturbation almost.
yeah, I don't even know what's going on there. It does seem like maybe two rival lords are having a spat, and so they're having their gangs fight it out. I don't know.
Yeah, that's very strange. It's hard to know, and you don't get a lot of media coverage on that area either. You know what I've sort of come. Oh, do you know who the biggest advertiser is for media?
Oh, probably Jim Pattison, I'd imagine.
The government. And
Yeah.
And that's true in every country. The government's always the biggest buyer of advertising.
Yeah, I know in Canada they straight up just own large shares of almost all of our major news outlets.
Well, they'll first of all the CBC, that's basically completely subsidized. And then they give grants to Global. What was it? The Globe or whatever. What's the Toronto bud?
Oh yeah, the Globe and Mail.
The Globe and Mail, yeah, and the National Post.
Yeah, the National Post takes federal money.
And they're actually owned by an American company, so really the profits are being sent to the states. But I don't understand why if they can't stand on their own feet, like why don't we just let them die?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious what's going on there. Like it's patronage.
Then we have why don't we bring back the typewriter repairman? Like, how cruel is that? A guy probably spent 20 years learning how to repair typewriters, and he's been out of work for 20 years.
Yeah.
Basically, it makes no logical sense. But when it comes to it makes sense when it comes to power, but that's about it.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Like people either sort of get it or they don't. Like I think if you look at any country and saw that the government was putting almost every journalist in the country on the payroll, you would pretty quickly surmise what the situation was.
Yeah, there's definitely a profound there are some like sort of alternative news organizations that are sort of crowdfunded by say average folks. They have like brave journalists that do actual journalism, but the ones that are in the mainstream are almost neutered. Like they have they're just complete cowards when it comes to truth. They never confront the powers because I guess the power's feeding them, and they know not to bite the hand that feeds them. But it's just pathetic.
Yeah, and I'll say in terms of the news sources that are like not compromised in Canada, sort of independent media, it does seem to be the case that if you are a respectable, person who dresses nice and doesn't swear, and you're reporting on things that are established facts, then you can be a free journalist and you can be a government critic. Like True North News would be one of those examples, or some other people that have YouTube shows like Viva Fly. But if you decide to become an investigative reporter like Rebel News, and you decide to actually look into some of the crimes of people who are connected to government officials, then you do get intimidated by police, and you get the book thrown at you, and it does seem to be the case that way.
Yeah, it's pretty pathetic, like that this has happened. I was always told that journalism was a noble profession, but the more and more I look into it, I'm more like, well, was it ever?
Yeah.
Maybe we were just gaslit this whole time. But I do say there are good writers out there though, like Rex Murphy. I don't know if everything he writes is perfect, but he's such a great. He's really good at making strong points in such an interesting way. Like his writing's phenomenal, but he's just one amongst an ocean,
Yeah,
and also he's old, so he's not going to be around writing for too much longer. Unfortunately, hopefully he'll be blessed with a long life.
Well, yeah. I mean, if his eyebrows droop any deeper, he'll just be asleep every time he's on screen.
Yeah. I love his Newfieisms too. They're great.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely an all-time Canadian Hall of Famer. I think he got his start. He ran in a Newfoundland election for Parliament in like 1960 or something. I can't even remember.
That's pretty awesome.
But yeah, I think he ran against a communist, and I think he lost for the Newfoundland legislature. Yeah.
Well, you know what they say about Newfies.
What do they say?
I don't know. They all moved to Alberta. All the good ones moved to Alberta, anyways.
There's a lot of folk songs about that. Oddly, if you go into like Canadiana and like prairie songs, there's a lot of songs about I used to be a fisherman in Newfoundland and now I'm a cowboy.
That's true. Yeah, a lot of Newfies moved out to Alberta, and they started marrying Albertan women there, and they just stayed because what's the point of going back,
Yeah.
That's the funny thing too, is like the federal fisheries, once they took control of the quota system, because before, as a Newfoundlander fisherman, you'd go out, right, and you'd know everyone in your village, and you'd bring in your catch, and you'd see all your friends, and you would kind of have a sort of a gentleman's agreement not to overfish, because that meant you were hurting everybody else, right, in the community. So there was a natural respect where you wouldn't overdo it. But then when Fisheries and Oceans took over, they came up with a quota system, right? You put the experts in charge, and they were going to figure out how to properly balance the supply of fish so that no one was poor and you had enough fish to go around. It was supposed to be super efficient and great. But then, because of the quota system, everyone just always maxed out their quotas, right? And this is what led to the shortage, because it's like, well, and I remember too, in the 90s, at some point, fish became super affordable. Like, you could get cod for almost nothing compared to, say, beef and chicken. And it was because the market was absolutely flooded with these fish from the Grand Banks. And what happened was they overfished, because oh man, I'm not making enough money off my catch now because the supply of fish is so high. But it wasn't sustainable because guess what? The scientists and the experts that are up in their ivory towers, they don't actually know what the proper quota is because the quota system's nonsense. If it had been left in the hands of the fishermen on the shores, it probably would have been. We'd probably still have an Atlantic cod fishery. But because they put it in the hands of these experts, it collapsed within, like, what, 20 years? A fishery that had been around since the 1600s? Gone.
Yeah, that's pretty disgraceful.
It just it transformed. It basically destroyed Newfoundland's culture because it was all centered around fisheries. All these little villages all dotted around with the funny names like Dildo. And now they're just like tourist towns at most and completely abandoned at worst. And these are like long-standing communities, like hundreds of years, just gone.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, a semi-independent nation at one point.
Essentially, yeah.
Could have been.
And then you put it in the hands of these expert Laurentians, and it all goes to hell.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm sure the Minister of Fisheries drew a lovely salary.
He did, and then he said, "Wow, despite all my efforts, look what's happened."
And you know the great thing about that is if he does a great job managing the fisheries, great. If he does a bad job managing the fisheries, oh no, I need more money to fix this problem.
Yeah, but the thing is, there might be no fixing it because cod don't really exist as individual fish. Like, you sort of need giant schools of them to survive and thrive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that might be over for it. I mean, I hope not, but I don't think the answer is going to be more friggin' bureaucrats determining how many fish a fisherman can get.
Yeah, this reminds me of I don't usually watch CBC, but my dad was watching it the other. This was maybe a month ago, and I walked in, and the program he was watching was about how there was some fish stock that had been depleted. This was in Nova Scotia, and it had led to this infestation of a certain type of crab that was just taking over this environment as an invasive species, and it was really messing with fishermen. And so what the government of Canada had done as a solution was they had gone to a part of the world where these crabs originated from, and they basically paid to import to Canada anyone who was experienced with cooking and serving this crab. And that they were then placing these chefs in all of these government-owned hotels to like change the menus over to sort of like socially engineer Nova Scotians to enjoy eating this type of crab, so that the fishermen would then be able to profitably collect the crab. Which, I don't know, it sounds like a crazy, centrally planned social engineering plan, but I don't know, maybe that's a kind of like at that scale, something like that can be beneficial. What do you think about that?
That kind of reminds me of, I mean, it's just trying to come up with a solution to a problem, I suppose.
Yeah, obviously it was the CBC, so it seemed like it was a great success and a great plan because it's a government enterprise. But
I mean, if you poop all over the floor and then you clean it up, I guess that's better than just leaving it there.
Yeah, I guess that's the point.
That kind of reminds me of the Pitcairn Islands, if you're aware of them. They're like these group of 4 islands in the middle of the South Pacific. They're first settled by, I guess, Polynesians a long time ago, but then they left, and this ship called the Bounty came, and eventually the crew mutinied. Long story short, the crew went to this island called Pitcairn's Island because it was charted wrong. Then they settled there with their Polynesian wives, so British guys with Polynesian women.
Okay.
And the descendants of these people are still there. But and before they used to be on a shipping lane, so like ships would come by and bring supplies, and they'd have tourists and stuff that came by, but they've kind of fallen out of style, I suppose. There's still some cruise ships that go by once a year. But they don't have a lot of ways to make income because they're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and it's expensive to get food and stuff. They're still part of the British Empire. Anyways, yeah, there's like 60 people on this island, and they had nothing. They had nothing really they could sell. They used to make like knickknacks or sell stamps or websites to like Coca-Cola, you know.
Yeah.
But now what they have is they have like honey. They imported honeybees. They're really docile, and so but this island's really isolated. So the honeybees can only get honey from the trees that are on the island. Because if they go too far, they'd be dead.
I see.
So it's very pure honey because it's like in the middle of nowhere, and then they sell that, and so that's sort of kind of I think that was a good idea because it's a relatively cheap way to enhance that area, and the honey's apparently really awesome because there's no pesticides or anything, right? The healthiest bee population on Earth.
Yeah, that's quite cool. I'd never heard of that.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. There's a couple movies, one with Mel Gibson and Anthony Hopkins. It's called The Bounty.
Okay, I've heard people say Mutiny on the Bounty.
Yeah, there's two movies. There's an older black and white one, and there's one that was made in the 80s with Mel Gibson.
Okay.
I like the Mel Gibson one because I like the two actors that are in it. Well, actually, who's the guy? Liam Neeson's in it too.
Okay.
It's like one of his first movies. It's kind of funny.
Sounds like a mid-90s movie.
I think it's mid 80s. I think it's 84 or something. But yeah, it's pretty good.
All right.
And Mel Gibson, of course, doing his old Mel Gibson stuff.
Always entertaining, Mel Gibson.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a fun movie to watch. Yeah. Well, we're coming up on. We're just past 10 o'clock actually. Do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Let's wrap her up.
So what do you? So we're gonna meet up again on Thursday, I believe.
Yeah, in
IRL.
person meet up for coffee.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we'll have a chat, and we'll come back on Sunday, same time, if that works for you. And we'll call this inaugural episode. Then we'll go episode 1 next week, I suppose. Maybe we'll come up with some more topics and have more of a chat as well. Just probably go for like an hour again.
I think this has been a roaring success.
Yeah, it was fun. It went pretty well. All right, well, you take care, and I'm gonna end the stream.
All right, have a good night, man.
Just hold on there for a sec. I'll end the stream, then we'll